Welcome to Service Desk.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Kim. This is where we help users help themselves.
And hopefully ourselves as well, because, man, sometimes I feel like I don't know enough.
It's so true.
Especially with today's topic, it's going to be a lot of you.
Yay!
I'm going to learn a lot. I'm excited.
Well, good. I don't know how much I can teach, but we'll go from here.
Before that, though, I got some really interesting kind of tech news to kind of talk about here.
Ooh, I like interesting news.
So we'd like to kind of go and follow in with, our own digital assistants like Alexa and Google Home.
Yes.
We had our Alexa Laughter Watch, which mine very unfortunately never started laughing.
So sad.
And my Google device has not started laughing, but yesterday they had a giant outage where pretty much all of the Google Homes and Minis just didn't work in the morning. Yeah. Which really kind of raises an interesting thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's not like it's a unique thought. It's been thought before, especially with any managed service.
Right.
But it's like, what happens when the company just isn't there any longer?
Right.
Not that Google's in any position for that, or what happens, when, there's an outage, or if you have a Xenoblast, webcam security in your home and that company folds and goes under, well, you've been paying to have all of your data stored and all these devices that are Xenoblast brand.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see as we
evolve,
dive into this, world of things, or Internet of Things.
There you go. Get the right terms, man. Come on.
There we go. Exactly. Confuser, people. As we dive into this Internet of Things, I'm really interested to see the first few large companies that fold in the aftermath.
It's going to be interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Because even
there's small. Oh, go ahead.
Speaking of outages, yesterday Slack went down for a few hours too.
I don't use that myself, but I heard about that.
Yeah, apparently there were some companies, like they use this as their normal just communication across all their offices. And so when it went down, they were scrambling and falling back to, email, things that nobody actually wants to deal with. So
Email?
I know. It's insane.
Man.
Dark ages, man. Dark ages.
Something a little less techy, but still dealing with, cell phones and stuff.
Sure.
Looks like the creator of Pokemon Go is going to start selling the software behind Pokemon Go.
Ooh.
So other games can be made. So I know they talk about there's a Harry Potter one that they want to make.
Well,
and I think this will be fun and exciting.
Interesting.
Yes.
That could be fun. Just think of, Zelda to go would be fun. I don't know what you would collect, though. Maybe just...
I don't know what you'd really collect in Harry Potter, too. Like, are we just going to have little Harrys running around and being, like, I don't know, catching them?
Go collect all the Mandrake roots or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Or maybe Hagrid released his animals or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there was a big break at the Griffin pen or something. And then finally something a little more serious. Looks like there was another big data breach.
Oh no.
Yeah, and it's a bad one. And they're actually saying this possibly could be one of the worst in history. Not even American history, but history.
Yay.
A private, very small Florida company had the personal data of virtually every American adult.
What?
And
why?
Yep. They're a data aggregation company.
Okay.
Which tells you everything, I suppose. I don't know. But they had 340 million individual records on a public server.
What? Why a public server?
It thankfully doesn't include any credit card numbers or social security numbers, but it does have things like your phone numbers, your home address.
I mean,
email,
340,
anything that's like personally, like over 400 personal characteristics. So things like, do you smoke? What political view are you? What's your religion? Are you a cat, a dog person? Do you like to brush your teeth? What's your toothpaste? Stuff like that.
Oh, man. Also, now that I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons, a cat person is an actual thing in that game. So now I'm a tabaxi.
You're a little more confused. Anyway. But yes, so pretty much, yeah.
So what happened that it
looks
was
like they
public?
said-
Like, did they just not secure their server, or were they hacked, or what?
According to this New York Post article that I'm reading, they basically said 3.5 billion consumer demographic reports.
Just being stored there? Like,
Yeah,
who needs to lock this down? No biggie. Just everyone's info.
exactly.
Awesome.
So it'll be interesting to see how this goes out. While, you can't steal someone's identity, or you can't necessarily directly hurt them, you can use the info that they leaked to steal your identity.
Right.
Yeah,
Like, what street did you live on growing up?
exactly.
What was your
What's
first
your
dog's
dog's
name?
Mother's maiden name?
Oy.
Yeah.
Yay!
So on that fun note, let's head into our topic for the day, which I'll leave you to introduce us to here.
Right. So every week, every time we produce episode, we always say to contact us on Twitter, but not everybody has a Twitter. So we're going to talk a little bit about the ins and outs and what in the world you would actually do on Twitter. So Andrew, do you even have an account?
I do. I think I have two. One that I use as spam to retweet and get into contests with.
That's not a bad
and
idea.
one that I use just for my personal that is very, very, very neglected.
Oh, poor Twitter account.
I was going to say, so I understand the basics of it is that it's, you kind of make little small status updates.
Yes.
And you can share other people's statuses updates.
That is the basics of Twitter, yes. So when they started, it was originally something that was really meant almost more for text messages. So they could send out, the reason it's 140 characters, or at least it was, is the limit for text messaging was 160. And so to include your Twitter handle and then whatever you wanted to type, it had to be 140 characters and then a 20 character Twitter handle. So that's where the limit came in. And at first it was used for things like, oh my gosh, there's a giant fire at such and such place, watch out for whatever. Like those kind of basically breaking news, emergency, tweeting at all your people. And people used it for whatever they wanted to. So there was a lot of like, I had pizza for lunch. Yay.
Yeah, and that's the point where I had heard about it and I looked into it and I was like, well, I don't see the point in this, And so I kind of missed out on looking into it further as it evolved and grew into something more.
Right.
I will say the few times I have used it, and maybe you can expand on this as to how it is like this nowadays, but I would say at least half or more of my tweets are towards companies.
Oh, yes, 100%. So what companies do now is they have accounts on Twitter because people will go, when you're mad and upset about something, you just want to go rant and rave and, be like, oh my gosh, Walmart did this to me. It's terrible. I can't believe what I have to deal with these people. And so companies, in kind of a PR attempting to mitigate some of those bad status updates, have gone to Twitter and created their actual account. And they employed people to go out and actually look for people tweeting at Walmart or whatever company it happens to be, and go in and try to make things better. So not all companies do this equally well, but I have definitely gone to people on Twitter or even just tweeted something else that was, I didn't really want help, but I was just irritated and like, oh my gosh, Charter, your internet's out again. This is so irritating. And then they'd be like, what can I do to help?
That's a good example, because I know here at my apartment, my roommate, the fastest way to get a hold of our internet provider is to tweet at them instead of going on the phone call.
Right. Well, and that's partially because from a business perspective, you can have somebody on Twitter and they can respond to, hundreds of things in an hour if it's just a quick, like, you can have, copy paste text that you're just like, hey, let me help you. I'm sorry you're having trouble. And then people feel like they're being looked after and taken care of. Whereas if you get on the phone, we've all been in the phone nightmare.
Exactly, where all you just hear is that elevator music.
Your call is important to us. Please stay on the line for our next available assistant.
Did you know you can check the status of your...
Yes, we all hate them because it's so insincere and pre-recorded BS that nobody wants to listen to.
So Yeah, so that's an interesting thing is that Twitter, I think the reason why consumers took to Twitter to complain and try and get attention
Well,
is because it was so public.
yes,
And then companies realized, well, we need to try and save face.
Exactly.
Where now I'm starting to see like every single, anything from like Dell down to like my neighborhood mom and pop restaurant
they all have Twitter.
has an active presence on Facebook now.
Oh, Facebook too. Yeah.
Facebook Messenger, which is private.
Yes.
And I think that's a smart move on the business side of point because it's all
Right.
behind the scenes.
Right.
So if they're able to stay responsive and helpful on that, I think people are happy with that. But
Right.
an interesting move where one medium is so public, like Twitter, and then you move over to direct messaging on Facebook, which is so private.
Yes. And that's one thing to consider. There is a way to make your Twitter account private, but it only then goes out to your followers, which if you want to tweet at companies and tweet at other things, they can't see you. So,
if you make your Twitter account private,
yes.
if you tweet at someone, they can't see it unless they're following you.
Correct. So only your
Oh.
personal followers would be able to see whatever. And if you're private, I'm not sure if there's different levels or if it's just the same for all private Twitter accounts, but you have to verify anybody who wants to follow you. So if you don't go in and verify anybody, you might not have any followers, which is kind of difficult. So let me go back up a moment. So when you get onto Twitter, you get your little handle and it's an @ and whatever name you've come up with. And usually they're all taken. So you get to like your 18th option anymore. So you get this handle and then you choose to be public, which is the default, or private. And one of the things people really like about Twitter is if you are public, everybody can see your tweets. So if somebody really, really likes your tweet and they go ahead and retweet it, which is just taking your words and putting it in their timeline. And so your whatever you posted is then spread to another person's follower count. And if those followers see it and they retweet it, that's when it gets going viral, is what they call it.
Oh, so that's when you see when they talk about like the most viral stories of the day.
Yes, most of the time
Okay.
it's on Twitter, or at least that's where that kind of started. But with that, you also have to deal. You can block people. That's a part of the safety side of things. But if you say something political against Trump and all of his supporters come against you, or vice versa. You say something against liberal people and they all rally against you. You can get some serious bad mojo going against you on Twitter. And since it's public, you can have a lot of things to deal with if you listen to them. So
you mentioned kind of tweeting at people or tweeting about topics.
oh, yes.
And I know one thing that Twitter kind of, I don't know if they invented it, but they definitely made it popular. And you see it even nowadays on Facebook and other mediums, is the whole hashtag.
Yes.
And I believe, let me see if I can say this and you can confirm it or not.
Yes.
So when you hashtag it with like a word, so like hashtag first person or first world problems or hashtag happy.
Yes.
It kind of like categorizes your post.
Yes.
So if you ever search by that hashtag, you see everyone that tweeted with that hashtag.
Precisely. And
Okay.
companies and whatever will use that too to help them be able to find whatever issues are going on. But I've seen people use it for wedding. It's really bizarre, but that way they can find on Facebook and Twitter when people are posting pictures or talking about the wedding or whatever.
Oh, actually, that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah. So the first time I saw that, I thought it was insane, but it makes a lot of sense because you got a lot of people coming and you paid a lot of money. So might as well get all the memories you can out of that day.
Right? It's kind of like handing out disposable cameras at each table.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, yeah,
Only you don't have to pay to develop the film.
exactly. Or to develop the memories. Because Twitter will do that for you.
Exactly. And so the hashtag thing, it's supposed to be used that way. So you can sort through and find what other people are tweeting about. And to tweet at people, that little @ that I was talking about in the beginning of your Twitter handle is how people can reach out to you and vice versa. You can reach out to others. And so as long as you have their
yes.
name, you can be like, hey, at Walmart, your photo department really sucked today, or whatever.
Yeah, I find it interesting that these so often go across medians too, because you see the hat and the hashtags in Facebook. You see it, I think, in Instagram as well, which is basically Facebook. But before you see it, I mean, pretty much anywhere you see it. It's even become ubiquitous now where, like, if I'm in, like, a work chat or even, like, an email that I'm typing at work.
It's in the culture.
I will use at, my coworker's name to say I'm talking to him right now.
Yep. So that's one huge thing that Twitter's really spread, is that at whatever is now talking to someone, which makes sense from just a logical perspective, but it's bizarre. The hashtag thing too has spread everywhere, and I'm sure even if you live like under a technology rock, you still have seen, like, on a television show, somebody go, hashtag my hair is red, or whatever.
My favorite thing is when someone uses the hashtags, but they basically just have, like, a paragraph or more of hashtags.
That happens on Instagram, especially.
Or I've seen it where people will hashtag enough to where they basically just write a whole nother post within the hashtags.
Sometimes they're a separate post of themselves, yes.
Yeah. So Twitter used to be huge in the social media point. Now it seems to be a little more corporate.
Right.
And a little more newsy.
Well,
what's the future? What do you feel like it's going to be like going forward from here?
Well, the thing about Twitter is that it's a really easy way to try to reach out to communities of people. So if you want to reach out and find, I don't know, people around the world who really like dolls, I don't know, you might go search for a hashtag, or like if you're on a different website and they're like, oh yeah, go follow my Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Then if you go to that person's Twitter and you look at all their people that they follow, then you can find others that have similar interests. So in that way, I really enjoy the way you can kind of easily categorize and find people that are similar and can kind of give you the same content that you want.
Be right back. I'm going to go find my community of Spock from Star Trek riding a motorcycle, because I want more of that in my life.
Honestly, it probably exists.
I wouldn't be surprised.
For instance, the D&D Twitter community is amazing. There's a bunch of really cool people out there. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't just started on Twitter and been like, hey, this person's cool. Let me go through and see who they are, what they listen to podcast-wise or whatever. So that's a really neat way to use Twitter, is to find your people, basically. And it's also really good for things like you were talking about contests. So companies or even like small websites, I'm in a lot of podcasting areas, so you get to see different podcasts. Like it's a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, so that they reach 700 followers, they're going to give away a set of dice. Those kind of things where you're helping them, they're engaging with their community, and they're building goodwill all around. And it can be anything, it could be your local bread shop is giving a loaf of bread away to the person who, gets them up to 700 people or whatever. So it's a really good engagement kind of way to get people involved.
Nice.
And
well, I've always been like, I've always known the universe of Twitter existed. I've just never really looked into it much myself. It was kind of like I by the time I wanted to get into doing Foursquare,
oh yeah,
that whole thing was just dead.
Sure, yeah. But another thing with Twitter, so talk about safety on Facebook. On Twitter, you're public, so you can block people if you have certain ones who are causing trouble or what have you. But they also have direct messages, which is normally where the trouble comes. I mean, when you're on Twitter itself, the way the feed goes through is that unless you have alerts set up on certain people that you really want to make sure you see everything they say, you're not going to see everything. So if you're following 100 people and you're on there, well, even if you're on there 24 hours a day, like I have 1,000 people I follow, I do not see everything from all those people. But I have like I don't know, maybe a handful that I see everything they do because it's important to me to be able to see their tweet. And they don't tweet a lot usually. So if I don't do that, I completely miss them. But direct messages are a way for people to have a private conversation that's not just out in the Twitter sphere. So those private conversations are where the trouble usually comes. That's where you get the weird guy going, hey, I saw your avatar, pretty thing, blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, I have a company.
Oh, that was creepy.
It is creepy when it happens. Oh my gosh, I've blocked people that way.
Do those private conversations take place like a public post? Just you're only doing it to one person?
Ish. Yeah. I mean, it's still the same limitations as public Twitter. So yeah. But that's where if you were conversing, especially with a company or with, say you had some creator you've reached out to and you're like, hey, this thing broke or what have you. And then they wanted to make it right to you, they would say, hey, my DMs are open. Send me your address and I'll whatever. So that way you don't have to reveal your phone number, address, whatever you may need to give to people publicly. But open DMs can also cause trouble because, as we all know, people who think they are anonymous on the internet will say and do terrible things. And so if they're in direct messages, they can say and do even more terrible things because they're private and anonymous. So that sucks. So most of the time, I think it defaults to set your direct messages to only allow people you follow to direct message you. So you have to be following each other in order for those to go through. You can set it so that public people, anybody can direct message you, but that's generally not a great idea because of the weirdos.
Yeah, that seems like it could cause a lot of kind of issues out there.
Yeah. So in that way, Twitter's really nice that you can just block them all. It's like the filter on Facebook messaging we talked about last time. It's very helpful. Oh, another thing is that you can have a whole bunch of Twitters. So in Facebook, they want you to use your real name, but in Twitter, it doesn't matter. You can pretend to be... One of the ones I follow is Beaker from Muppets. And it's Beaker Meeps is his Twitter handle.
That's awesome.
And he just literally goes, meep, 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 meep. And it's usually there's a GIF or like emojis or something, but it's hilarious. And I love him.
I will say that's the one thing about Twitter I have done a lot with is that there's a lot of joke ones out there. Like things my dad says or, yeah. Just lots of fun stuff.
Yeah, and it's a great place to kind of workshop. So a lot of comedians are out on Twitter, just like randomly throwing stuff out there. And I really enjoy it that way. And a lot of content creators, so whether they're on Twitch or YouTube or they have a podcast or what have you, they'll be on Twitter. And so if something's happening, like I know the McElroy brothers, they have like a gajillion podcasts. They will get on Twitter and be like, hey, sorry, our episode's going to be a day late because whatever. And they'll just kind of send the word out so people don't freak out when the podcast isn't available the day that's supposed to be. And similar things, I've seen people just be like, hey, I'm going to stream my game suddenly at 11 o'clock at night. Come watch me if you want to. And those kind of things happen that unless you were on Twitter, you would never know.
Awesome. I feel like I finally learned something that I should have really known a long time ago.
And the main thing about Twitter is following the people you care about, the companies you care about, so that way you don't just stare at mundane things that you don't have any desire to look at. And one thing I absolutely love about Twitter is you can just tweet out a thing and be like, hey, famous person, I have a question. And then the person themselves could respond. Probably not, but depending on level of fame and question. And if they see it, because I'm sure they get tweeted at all the time. But if they don't answer it, a lot of times other fans will jump in and be like, oh yeah, it XYZ or whatever question you might have. So that's super fun. And it feels really important when you're like, oh my gosh, this really famous person responded. I'm really important now. Look at me. I'm Twitter famous. And It's also fun if you are starting an enterprise. So, say you have a podcast and you want to be able to engage others and,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
You'd be able to reach out directly to your support and user base.
Exactly. So the same thing the big companies do, you can do as a small starting company. And a lot of times people kind of get together. Like for podcasting in general, there's a hashtag called Podern Family. So if you ever see tweets from Service Desk on the day of release, I will include that because then other people in this family also retweet whatever that hashtag is, and it just kind of spreads you a little bit further. So that's always nice. And yeah, good stuff.
Well, I suppose I don't really have anything other than that. That was awesome. That was more than I would have been able to kind of talk about.
It's really fun, and now they've actually extended to 280 characters. So it's really fun to summarize, make it short and sweet. But now you can include a little bit more information, and actually there are specific like the link shortening sites. I don't know if you ever use like the bit.ly or what have you. Those were created because of Twitter, because you could not put the whole thing in a tweet.
That makes sense.
And so they created those to make it easier to tweet about links, mostly. So yeah, otherwise, I know that sometimes people think that it's kind of hard to follow because it's literally stream of consciousness almost. Like it's just whatever somebody has put out there. But you just kind of have to get on it and follow a bunch of people. Like I would say maybe start with 20 people because they try to get you in there looking at things. And go to, I don't know, whatever your favorite company is or whatever your favorite game happens to be, and look at what their hashtags are, look for their company website, and you can go through and see who's following them. And then you can kind of find people to be like, oh, this person looks interesting from their Twitter bio. Let me go see what they're about. And yeah, just kind of go from there.
I'll have to go explore after this.
And of course now there's GIFs all over Twitter, and you can share videos and all kinds of good things that are super duper fun. And if you're political, oh boy, it's a minefield. Like everything political is. Just, don't feed the trolls if you can avoid it.
That's a good rule of life.
In general, yes. Unless you're Hagrid.
And in that case, it's your job.
Exactly. Oh, not that he was supposed to be keeping trolls, but I probably did anyway. So, you can find us on Twitter at Service Desk Pod. If you have any questions, you can certainly come follow us first if you've never been on Twitter before.
And the site that I'm more familiar with, you can find us on Facebook as well at facebook.com/Service Desk Podcast.
And then you can find us, where else? Oh, email us.
On our website.
Our website, that too.
Yes, servicedeskpodcast.com, as well as our email, as Kim was just about to say, servicedeskpodcast@gmail.com. Like I said in previous ones, please be sure to rate and review us. If anything, just comment. Say what you had for breakfast that morning, if you can't think of anything nice to say.
Yeah, and if you get this far in the podcast,
the engagement
tweet at
will
us.
push our podcast up, especially on iTunes.
Yes, especially iTunes. And if you get this far in the podcast and you're still listening, tweet at us with hashtag Twitter is awesome. Just because.
Hashtag Kim and Andrew.
That too.
Hashtag I had peanut butter and jelly.
Unless, of course, you're allergic to peanuts.
I'm just going crazy right now because I'm inventing all these hashtags. I feel like I have a power.
You do. You are a powerful human being, Andrew.
Nice. Well, I'm Andrew.
I'm Kim.
And we are your techie friends.